Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. This webinar is brought to us by the Systematic Reviews Network, collaboration with AuthorAid. The Systematic Reviews Network was formerly called the African Community for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. The Systematic Reviews Network is a registered charity in Nigeria and is committed to building capacity in systematic reviews and meta-analysis, and of course, other types of evidence synthesis for researchers in low and middle income countries. And over the years, we have conducted tons and tons of webinars and workshops and capacity building mentorship programs to support the production and use of systematic reviews in low and middle income countries. So the Systematic Reviews Network is supported by AuthorAid. AuthorAid is now called Rising Scholars. AuthorAid, or Rising Scholar, is a global community of researchers. We have over 15,000 researchers in our network, and the goal of Rising Scholars is to be a global community of researchers to support researchers in every stage of their research journey and from anywhere in the world. So during the course of this call, we'll be sharing links to our platforms. You can follow us on our social media handles, and we'll be sharing links to our WhatsApp community pages and our Google community group as well. So I've already shared the link to the Systematic Reviews Network social media handles, so you can follow us. We'll still share them in the course of the session. All right, so today's session, Introduction to Prisma, will be facilitated by Dr. Yasif Mathasinge. I hope I'm able to pronounce that correctly. He's a lecturer and researcher from Monash University, Australia. And without much ado, Dr. Yasif, can you hear me? Dr. Yasif, can you hear me? Dr. Yasif, can you hear me? Yeah.
Okay. Hello. Thank you very much, Fortune, for that introduction. Yeah, I was unable to unmute myself. Finally, yeah, I think everyone can hear us. Oh, thank you. Awesome. It was very nice to see participants from all over the world. It's a fantastic opportunity for me to present here, and it's really nice to get to know you all. I'll start sharing my screens, and I'll give some background about myself, and then maybe start from there. Take a look. So yes, slides are working. Thank you. So I'm a lecturer at Monash University. To begin my background, I first completed my medical degree from the University of Colombo, Sri Lanka, and then I did a brief research program in University of Queensland in Australia, and finally decided to start my PhD at Monash University in Australia in 2020. After my PhD, I did a postdoctoral research fellowship also in Monash University, and then I started working as a lecturer in anatomy and developmental biology in Monash University. My main research areas are looking into brain and how these uh, how we can like
Okay, I see.
how the yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, we were unable to see your screen. It's kind of fluctuating.
Oh, okay. Let me share again. Can you have already great, thanks. I've already given a brief introduction, so I'll just run through it again. So at the moment, I'm working at Monash University as a lecturer. My main research areas are looking into the development of the brain, especially the white matter, which helps in fast nerve signal conduction, especially this tiny area of the brain uh, uh, which communicates from the left side and the right side. So I'm heavily invested in microscopy based research. And I'm also part of a global burden of disease, uh, which is like a huge collaboration with more than 10,000 members in the world from a lot of countries, more than 150 countries. Uh, it's about synthesizing evidence-based population health statistics to inform the global health policies, like what's the current burden of diseases and how we are forecasting it into the future, like in 2050. And thirdly, I'm also a Cochrane member. I'm a Cochrane author. So if you have heard of Cochrane, it's one of the largest collaborations that we have for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. And I was fortunate to contribute to a couple of papers by the Cochrane collaboration. Uh, that's briefly my background. And currently, I'm located in Melbourne, and it is like 10:15 at night on Friday night, and hopefully, uh, uh, most of you are most of you are in your daytime. So enjoy the presentation. So before I start, I'll briefly tell you the structure of this. We would start with a small quiz. You might have heard of Kahoot. It's so if you have your mobile devices, you can scan the QR code and join it. I'll show the QR code in a second. After this, we will go through a small lecture, and in between there will be some activities where you'll go to different breakout rooms, come up with different ideas, solutions to the questions that we have today. And at the end, we'll have a question and answer session. Okay, so to start the quiz, um, so you might see a QR code appearing here. So if you can scan this, or just go to kahoot.it and enter this game pin, whichever works for you, and then you can enter this quiz. Great. Amazing. While you are joining, I'll briefly introduce you to Kahoot if you haven't used it before. Um, uh, so when we start the game, you will see the question appearing and then a timer countdown. There'll be a couple of questions. So these are single best response quizzes. You will get points if you hit the correct answer, and also it'll uh, also you'll get more marks if you um, hit the answer earlier. So it takes into account whether you're fast and whether your answer is correct as well. This is just to get a brief idea about what you're understanding about Prisma, because this is going to be a very introductory kind of a workshop rather than going into all the nitty-gritty details about it. Yeah, okay, I will start it. If you haven't joined, you can still join in between. But sometimes because of the network issues, you might not be able to join. Anyhow, let's start. Okay, the first question. Great, we have a very nice distribution. Most of you have never heard of. Yeah, a little and not at all. That's great. We will listen about Prisma guidelines soon. Okay, most of you got it right. Well done. It's mostly to do with systematic reviews and meta-analysis. And we'll talk about this very soon. Great, we have Ifioma leading this scoreboard. Yes, that's great. That's not only for clinical trials, not only for medical research. It can be used for any most of our research disciplines. And it was very nice to see that most of you have very diverse different backgrounds, so you all can use Prisma in your systematic review and meta-analysis. Great. The panda leading the leaderboard. Yes, so this Prisma reporting is mainly important for the transparency and reproducibility. For example, if I uh, publish a systematic review and meta-analysis using exact Prisma guidelines and checklist, anyone else in the world should be able to reproduce the same result um, using that. And even after like 10 years, if someone wants to update the systematic review, they should be able to use the same guidelines, same checklist, and reproduce the results irrespective of when and where we are doing it. So it's mainly to improve transparency and the reproducibility, and we'll talk more about this soon. Great. Yes, amazing. So in Prisma's checklist, we have a study selection process, and there are other aspects as well, which we will see very soon. Amazing. Three more questions. Yes, so excluding negative results is not a good idea. Um, Prisma is there to make you report all the necessary findings and so many other things so that the reader can get an informed decision rather than just excluding all the negative results and presenting uh, whichever the author believes is important. Yeah, very good. So it is all about reproducibility and transparency. Amazing. Last two questions. Very nice. So it can be used in very broad, very wide field of research. It's not only health research, which is amazing. The recent modifications to Prisma ensured that it can be broadly uh, used in a wide variety of research. Very good. The last one. Great. Most of these are some sorts of misconceptions. It was very recently updated in 2020, and it is important for both researchers as well as readers to get an informed decisions. It definitely does not guarantee publication, but it helps you get there. And it's too complex to use. It's actually pretty easy to use. When I first started systematic reviews, writing with systematic reviews, the two sources that I used was one, the Prisma guideline, and the second one, the Cochrane handbook. And if you know those two, you can write a systematic review. Awesome. We have the final leaderboard. Congratulations, Didi. That's- All right, congratulations. You go. We will go back to our slideshow. hopefully you can see it. Yeah. There are some annotations on my slide. I don't know how to get rid of those annotations. Just trying to erase. Oh yeah, it allows me to erase. Thank you. Okay, so what is Prisma? Most of you have answered it, answered correctly. It's about it's a set of guidelines that help the authors report systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Um, as researchers, as well as readers, it is very helpful for both of you to get a very informed decision. As a researcher, I would say Prisma checklist, it's very helpful in terms of how you would draft your research. And when you draft, you will realize, oh, I have not completed these aspects of the checklist. So there's something that we can use to improve our draft or our methods. And as we mentioned before, it helps improve the transparency and completeness of research. So anyone else can repeat the same research as you do. So it's not only for health research, it's anyone can use it in most of your research. Can be for both quantitative data and qualitative data. So it doesn't have to be a meta-analysis for you to uh, follow the Prisma guideline. Only if it's just a systematic review, still you can use Prisma. And there are so many extensions of Prisma guidelines for different types of research. So even if it's not a systematic review, but if it's something like a scoping review, you'll learn about all these different types of reviews in this webinar series. Uh, you can use it for a wide variety of reviews. So it's actually very handy, and there are multiple extensions. And how can you find this data? Actually, these two fantastic researchers, Prof. John Mackenzie and Dr. Matthew Page, they initiated this whole Prisma initiative, and I'm very lucky to say that they are also from my university, Monash University, Australia, and they've developed this website, uh, and this is the link for the website. I will put this link in the chat so you all can visit this website and just bookmark it, and use it for your research. So in this website, you have the checklist here and a flow diagram and a statement paper. We will go into each of these very soon. I think a very good place to start is this explanation and elaboration paper. So this paper was published in British Medical Journal, BMJ, and it very nicely explains what are the items in Prisma checklist, and it provides you with examples. And even if you are writing your paper, then you can actually follow that style and see what we are missing and how we can improve. So I would encourage everyone to go to this website and have a look what this Prisma checklist and the statement is. So as I briefly mentioned, Prisma has multiple components. One is the checklist. So what I usually do is when I write a systematic review, I would print this out and I would go through each of these items and check and see if I have completed these things. So if you follow all these things, you will have written a very nice manuscript by the end of the day. We'll go into each of these items pretty soon. And the second component is the flow diagram. So if you have read systematic reviews or meta-analysis, you might have seen this diagram. There are different variations of this diagram, depends on what kind of research you do, whether it's medical, clinical trials or whether it's just an observation study. It might differ, but you have all these different types of flow diagrams. And you can download the Word file and you can actually fill these and make it a figure for your research article. And we'll discuss about the flow diagram also in a bit. And finally, the statement, this paper, which is the updated guideline for reporting systematic review. So this was initially published in 2009, and then there was a recent update in 2020, which allows incorporation of multiple study types as well. Okay, we'll start with the checklist. Now, there's a small question, single best response type of question. Which of the following titles follow Prisma guidelines? So the Prisma checklist, the first item is about the title. So I would like you to just go through the answers and pick your answer and put it in the chat so that we can see what you mostly think. Okay, amazing. Most of you say it's B. That is great. Yeah, the whole idea of having the title in a systematic review is to say that it's a systematic review. So most of you, in most of the journals, you might have seen these very elaborate titles. We say it's a review, it's an overview. So Prisma guideline just say that it has to be reported as either a systematic review or systematic review and a meta-analysis, or even it could be a scoping review. Why? The search engines can easily pick up these things, and then it'll be easy for the readers to understand as a systematic review rather than just a narrative review, because narrative reviews you can do without a very proper structure rather than systematic review, where you are systematically going through the literature and showing all the negative and positive findings. Yeah. So in your titles, please have this term. If it's a systematic review, just write it as a systematic review. And also, you have to be very specific about the population that you are talking about, and also what kind of interventions you do. We'll talk about it very soon. So this is an example of a proper title. Here we are saying that it's a systematic review. There's no meta-analysis here. And you are also telling what kind of a comparison you are doing. It's a therapeutic effect of this drug against this drug in patients with this disease, right? So you have to be very specific and how to write these things. If you go into the website that I mentioned, you will see it gives very specific guidelines on how to write this or how to improve your title. Yeah, be specific and mention that it's a systematic review or a meta-analysis. Great. And the next activity, so the next item is how to report your systematic review abstract according to this Prisma checklist. Again, as in the title, in your abstract, you have to say that it's a systematic review or a meta-analysis. And secondly, you have to mention your objectives very specifically. So sometimes some researchers like to write it as a research question. So in that case, write the research question and objective both in the abstract. And then this is another very important thing that we miss in most of our systematic reviews. So when I get a systematic review to review, I would just go through the abstract first. And if the inclusion and exclusion criteria are not there, then I know not following Prisma checklist. So be very specific about the inclusion and exclusion criteria, and it has to be mentioned in your abstract. Then the information sources such as databases and the register that you have used. But however, sometimes the word limit in your abstract may not allow you to show everything, but it's very much encouraged to list the databases that you've used for your search in your abstract, and also the date when the last search was performed. Then methods used to assess risk of bias. So this is another topic for another webinar. I'm sure you will have a webinar on how to assess risk of bias. There are multiple tools. Cochrane has its own tools, and there are some other tools where you can use for observational studies, which is not the scope of today's webinar. However, make sure that you mention the source that you use for assessing risk of bias in your publications in the abstract section. And also the method used to analyze your results if you are doing a meta-analysis. If it's just a systematic review, this is not applicable. But if it's a meta-analysis, what kind of an approach, statistical approach that you used? Then finally, then you have to mention the total number of studies that's included and the main outcomes. And this is another thing that I do not see in many articles that I get to review. So please mention the limitations. For example, if you see publication bias or risk of bias is very high, just mention it in the abstract. Then the author can, the readers can get a very broad idea about whether it's a very homogeneous kind of analysis, whether there's a lot of bias, and we're unsure whether the results are generalizable. So just mention the limitations. And most of the authors, like even when I started, I thought writing limitations would make your manuscript less appealing to the editors. It is not. So editors and reviewers would really like to see what limitations are and if you have listed them in your abstract and your manuscript. So that's a really good thing to list all the limitations that you encountered. And finally, the general interpretation of results and the outcomes and the impact. And also make sure you list the funding and the registration number. So you'll learn about how to register your protocols before you start. There are multiple avenues. One is called Prospero. Before I start a systematic review, I would just go to Prospero and register our protocol. Then one good thing about it is now everyone else knows that there is a systematic review undergoing. So someone else will not start that systematic review. So we prevent multiple authors working on the same topic simultaneously. And also, if I get a systematic review to review, I would always go to their original protocol and see if you have deviated. So please provide that registration number in your studies. Some of the non-medical ones, without having a very specific outcome, may not be registered in Prospero, but there are other options that you can look into. And that's really good. Even as a preprint, you can register your protocol. Great. Now we have a small activity. I would like you to go into different breakout rooms, and I will give you around 7 minutes and go to the link I've provided and identify the Prisma checklist and read this abstract and see which areas are according to the Prisma checklist and which areas are not according to the Prisma checklist. And we'll come back in like 7 minutes and we'll discuss. If you haven't seen the website, this is the link to the website, and go to the Prisma um, checklist. This one, Prisma 2020 checklist. If you just Google Prisma 2020 checklist, it should come up and you can download it and then open here. Then you can go through okay, so this is not providing checklist. Maybe what you can do is go to the explanation and elaboration paper. This is that paper. So if you go down, you can see uh, this is the title section. Then you have the abstract section, and it has this checklist, this box. Just see if all these items are um, covered in that abstract.
So, Dr. Yasif, would you want participants to do this in breakout rooms?
Yes, that would be ideal if possible.
Yeah, it's possible.
And is it possible to share this screen for everyone in the breakout groups as well?
Oh, yeah, I think they can just make screenshots.
Okay. Okay, so we'll see in 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay. So we're initiating the breakout room now.
Yes, thank you.
I think we still have some persons who are here to join a breakout room. So you would see an option by, I think, the top left corner of the screen to join a breakout room. So you have 99 persons that are here to join a breakout room. Sith, can you hear me? Oh, we still have some persons who are here to join a breakout room. You should see an option maybe at the top left corner of your screen to join a breakout room. Okay, if you cannot see the breakout room option, I will manually assign you to one. So you can indicate, but already 5 minutes into this, so it's not much. So if you're not able to join a room, you can indicate in the chat box, and I would assign it to a room.
Did you wanna did everyone wants to share your ideas? Kamal, thank you. Abstract did not mention the registration number. Great. Great. There's no registration number. What else did you find? If you can put it in the chat, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, inclusion exclusion criteria, it was not well mentioned at all. Yeah, the risk of bias assessment, it was not covered. Yeah, did not quite see the exclusion criteria. Methods used to analyze results. That's really good. So it gives the result, it says pooled effect size of this, but it doesn't say what kind of an analysis you use, what kind of a meta-analysis you used. You'll get to know about these meta-analysis techniques hopefully in future webinars. Yeah. Registration number is not there. Software mentioned. Yeah, how the risk of biases assessed is, it was not mentioned. Great. I think, yeah, no primary source of funding. I think they say NIH, but it would be nice to say exactly which funding. Yeah, great. I think you came up with all the answers. Beautiful. Amazing. So we'll continue with our slideshow. Hopefully you can see. Fortune, could you please confirm if you can see?
Sorry?
Can you see the screen now?
Yeah, very well, you can see the screen.
Nice. Okay, so we went through this. Great. We did this activity. Now the rationale. I find rationale is the hardest part to write when you start writing a systematic review. Like, you have to mention why we are doing the systematic review. Or sometimes others have done a similar systematic review and why are you updating it and what is new in your systematic review. So how I usually start writing this is just start with bullet points and write down whenever you read something, what is the current knowledge? And then you can organize the manuscript accordingly later. So just write the current knowledge and which areas are not covered in your in the previous analysis, if there are previous systematic reviews already reported. And what is the importance or the impact of this review, whether it'll confirm uh, uh, the guidelines that are already available, like say in WHO guidelines. So there are current systematic reviews exploring this aspect, but this is an aspect that is not covered. That's the uncertainty. And this review will inform how we treat patients with hypertension, things like that. So that's the impact and the importance of the review. And especially if there's a review that is already existing, why do we do this review again, or why are we updating it? That's the necessity of this review, and what kind of interventions, what kind of outcomes we are exploring in this review. So this is like the introduction of your systematic review. Again, if you want to see more examples, go to the website I mentioned. It has multiple examples from the papers that are already published. Great. That is the rationale. And then the objectives. The next one is objective. This is again kind of pretty difficult to write. So most of us try to write objectives in one sentence. It doesn't have to be like that. If you go to that website, you will see how we write the objectives. It can be one paragraph. One objective could be one paragraph. So these are the main areas that you have to write in your objective. The population. So in the previous abstract, you saw adolescents, but it's not very specific as some of you mentioned. You have to say adolescents from which background, uh, what's the exact age cutoff, um, and adolescents with anxiety, or if it's anxiety, what kind of diagnostic criteria you use. So everything has to be mentioned on the population. And the second one is the intervention. Now, this is not applicable to most to all the systematic reviews because some of them are not intervention-based systematic reviews. But if there's an intervention, say a medicine for uh, hypertension or high blood pressure, that has to be specifically mentioned. This is the drug that we are looking at. That's the intervention. And if there's an intervention, you always have to have a comparator. So is this drug being tested against the current gold standard, or are there multiple drugs, or is it just untreated? So most of the times it is against the current gold standard medicine, or say pain relief, it's against paracetamol, something like that. And finally, the outcome. Outcome again can be multiple things like reduction of hospitalization, the duration of hospitalization, or mortality, like whether it has a benefit in mortality, whether you die or not. Or you can have multiple outcomes. So list all the outcomes in this framework. Uh, uh, yeah, so again, to learn more, go to the website and have a look at the examples that are written there. Great. So again, you have an objective. You don't have to go into breakout rooms for this one. Think of your research area and hypothetically think of a meta-analysis or systematic review that you want to do and write an objective according to those 4 guidelines that I just mentioned. And I would encourage you to put it in the chat. Develop an objective according to the guidelines. So these are the guidelines. So you have right, population, intervention, comparator, and outcome, if it is appropriate for your research. And let's see your answers. Yeah, great. So there are already there are some um, arguments about PICO. It could be PECO. There are more extensions. Could it be exposure? Or could it be it all depends on the type of systematic review that you're doing. If it's an intervention based systematic review, it could be intervention. If it's an exposure based one, it's an exposure. Yeah, great. Thank you. Great, we have an answer from Kamal. This systematic review okay, aims to assess the effectiveness of fentanyl versus remifentanil on the length of stay among ICU patients. That is remarkable. Very good. So we have the intervention, fentanyl, and the comparator, remifentanil, um, and the outcome we are looking at length of stay among ICU patient is the population. That's great. Um, is it all the ICU patients, or is it a very specific ICU based patient? We can say uh, uh, it's for pain reliefs of. So is it specific to one sort of a trauma, injury, something like that? Could be a little bit more specific, but this is amazing. And when do we use intervention or exposure? Yeah, it depends. So, so the idea from Kamal's answer, if it is if it is you looking at uh, comparing two drugs, that is an intervention based one, or if you're looking at an outcome, say uh, let's say risk factor based analysis, so whether these risk factors like smoking, etc., would cause heart failure. That could be an exposure based analysis. Yeah, the control of PPH among postpartum mothers using passive or active third stage management, a systematic review. Yeah, that's great. That's great. We have the population, postpartum hemorrhage patients. We have comparator and intervention and outcome, um, the control of PPH. Yeah, so you can say whether it could be morbidity. You are looking at the length of hospital stay or mortality, uh, like how many patients will survive, something like that. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah, this is beautiful. So we have a systematic review synthesis evidence on effectiveness of PRP interventions in reducing HIV transmission. Very specific. This is a very specific outcome. That's good. High-risk populations compared to standard prevention methods, focusing on randomized control trials and observational studies. This is amazing. Yeah, I think I have 10 new messages. Okay, I think you all got the idea of PICO or PICO framework. Yeah, great. Uh, so this is one example that is available in that BMJ paper that I just mentioned to evaluate the benefits and harms of down titration. That means dose reduction. So you can have all these things within brackets. I think that's a really great idea to have everything in the objective within brackets. So it could be disease activity, guided dose tapering, so reduction of dose directly, or just stopping the dose of this particular drug, anti-TNF drug, uh, and and the outcomes are disease activity, function, cost, safety, radiographic damage in rheumatoid arthritis. So it could be multiple. So you don't have to have a single objective. You can have multiple objectives. You can write them as separate objectives if you want, or combine everything together in one objective. Yeah, amazing. Great. And again, another thing that was missing in the previous abstract was eligibility criteria, and you told me that is one of the main missing factors. Yeah. So again, even for eligibility criteria, you follow the PICO framework uh, if it's applicable for you. And a few other things that you have to mention are the report characteristics, like whether you search everything from the inception, or did you say in 21st century you only uh, uh, search for these years of publication. For example, if a new concept came up, say, oh, say new disease like COVID came up, no point searching the literature from the concept from its inception. But so you would restrict your search to 2020-ish, 2019, 2020-ish, yeah. And whether you had language restrictions. So all these things should be written in the eligibility criteria. And the next one is information sources. So you would search multiple databases. Again, this is something that I see in most of the studies. They would just list the databases rather than going into exact which database. So they would just say, I'll search Ovid. But actually, I would really like to see a table saying, okay, under Ovid, I search Medline, Embase, all these little databases, and they are covering from 1946 to present. Some of them are from 1806 to present. So you can find all these details in your databases. If you go to Ovid and search, it'll say this is showing data from 1947 to present. So this is mentioned by coverage, and also you have to mention the search date. So the current Cochrane guideline says you have to publish your results within 1 year of your search. And sometimes the reviewers would ask you to update. So if you update the search, you can have it as a separate sentence and say, I updated the search on this date. Great. Now, then you'll have to write a search strategy. Another very common thing that I see is when you use a search strategy like this, you on one particular database, you would only present that in your in most of the manuscripts that I've seen. But the Prisma guidelines state that you have to provide the search strategy for each of your database search. So what I would do is I would put everything in the supplement and say, for this database, this is the search string I use. And for the next database, this is the search string I use. Because when you get to know about this search, you will see we use different methods of combining the different truncation methods, different terms. For example, for PubMed, there are medical terms, medical subheadings, mesh terms that may not be applicable for another database. So there may be subtle changes. The whole idea is if I am going through your paper, if I'm peer reviewing your manuscript, I would try to do this search by myself and see if I'm getting the same results. That's pretty common. So, and I would also see if I'm an expert on this topic, I know these are the main papers on this topic. And I would do this search and see if these papers are getting picked up by research. So it is very important for you to provide your search strategy or search string for all your different databases in your supplement. Great. So that's also in the Prisma checklist. And the next one is the selection process. So when you go through the individual studies, it could be just one reviewer selecting your article. So it could be more than one. Maybe it's like two people, or maybe sometimes it's like two reviewers would screen the first 100 articles and come up with a strategy, and after that only one reviewer reviews it. So you have to be very transparent on how you screen the articles. Sometimes you can use machine learning. There are many software that can incorporate machine learning based algorithms to the screen. So if you use it, please mention that. And sometimes there is a technique called priority screening with automatic elimination. So all the most, I would say most applicable topics would appear at the top of your search, and you keep searching those, you keep reviewing those, and you decide to eliminate after one point. Okay, I'm not going to screen the next 500 search hits because that's not necessary. So you learn about selection process in other webinars, but the idea is, if according to Prisma guideline, you have to mention which method you used. So it's most commonly it's one or more, like two reviewers reviewing the articles. So this is another thing that is emerging. It's called crowdsourcing. Cochrane uses it. So you ask the public to screen for you and select whether it's a clinical trial or not, and then you can go into those details and see. You can screen further. So whatever the method that you use, please mention the method. Great. We are coming to the second part of our webinar. This is a Prisma flow diagram. Again, you can download this Prisma flow diagram from the website I mentioned and use whichever the version that you want to use based on your research. This is pretty straightforward. So this is like how many studies were identified in the first search, and then how did you screen, and how many were included. Again, another very common thing that I see is when I'm reviewing articles, I see if I add up all these, it has to come to the total hits that you initially identified. But when you go through these articles that have been excluded, included, you might sometimes see discrepancies, and that's like a red flag for a reviewer. So please be very careful and go through all these boxes meticulously and see what articles have been excluded, what articles have been included in your final analysis. And I would highly encourage you to provide this as one of the main figures in your manuscript. Great. And finally, we are discussing about the common pitfalls and best practices that I've experienced as in my career. So one thing is the structure is not conforming to the guideline. Most of the journals, they have these, they have adapted the Prisma guidelines in their abstract and the article guideline, but some do not. If that happens, what can we do? Sometimes they restrict the abstract to be 200 words. Sometimes they say you cannot have separate subheadings for your abstract, or even materials and methods. In that case, the Prisma guideline states that you can remove certain areas to make sure that you adhere to that manuscript guideline, the journal guideline, journal style. However, our friend would be the supplementary file. So in a supplementary file, any journal would accept a supplementary file, and you can write all these things in very minute details in your supplement. So I would have so sometimes in my articles, it's like article is 4 pages long and supplement is 45 pages long. Uh, so that is where you can put everything in, and your reviewers will definitely go through the supplements. That's one area where we can modify our Prisma approach. Again, I've briefly mentioned about the word limit. If your word count, if your journal does not allow you to go beyond certain word limit, elaborate your methods in your supplement. And even in some of my publications, I've elaborated the justification, extended justification in my supplementary file. Yeah, that's the way to tackle the word limit in most of these journals. And eligibility, in your eligibility or screening, in your search strings, if you have this limitation as language, that's again kind of a red flag for a reviewer. You can do that. You can only have English. That's fine. But most of the journals, or most of the editors, reviewers would like to see that you do not have language restrictions. So how do we tackle this? Now, you have a lot of AI-based resources where you can just ask them to translate. So I would copy and paste an article from any language and it'll translate it into English or your own language, and that'll help reduce this language restriction in your articles. So in most of my publications, I have not used English language as a restriction, like a filter in my search string. And the next one is inadequate descriptions of your search strategy. As I briefly mentioned before, provide the search string for all the databases in your supplement so that I can run it as a reviewer and say, okay, this is appropriate and these articles are not getting picked up and you need to add certain things. So yeah, that is very important as a reviewer to go through the search string. Finally, not reporting funding and disclosures. This is again a very specific thing, especially if you have publishing for Crane, they would look at all these disclosures. And one time we had an issue, one of our co-authors, after submitting the manuscript, after 6 months, went into a company which might have a potential conflict of interest with this initial manuscript that we submitted. So in the disclosures, in certain journals, they will say you have to disclose, and if you are not meeting this criteria, you cannot be a co-author because it might have affected the judgment of your screening and results and discussion. So please be careful. I would highly encourage you to go through your target journal criteria and funding and disclosure agreements. And some of them would say if you have the slightest financial affliction with certain certain products that you are, say, certain drugs that you are testing in this meta-analysis, they would not accept this. So be very careful. Cochrane is extremely strict about this, and there are some other many journals. So be very careful who are going to be included in your systematic review and meta-analysis as co-authors, and whether they have disclosures. So the best thing is disclose everything. You can even write to the editor and ask beforehand, we have these disclosures, is that fine for we to submit this article to your journal? The only thing is, if you don't disclose and if someone finds it out, your article will be retracted. That's not good for your career. Great. So that's all for today, and I'm very happy to answer if you have questions. And this is my email address. You're welcome to take it and write to me if you have further questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Yassi. So we have 7 minutes, but maybe we can extend the session by extra 10 minutes. So we have max 17 minutes for questions.
Yeah, okay.
And final comment. So I would like to get participant questions in the chat box. So I'll just take a few questions, maybe 3 questions, and then maybe the rest of the questions can come to your email.
Yeah.
All right. Someone said, can we use Prisma for scooping and narrative reviews? This is coming from Yesara Karim.
Yes, a great question. Prisma has an extension for narrative reviews, scoping reviews. So if you search Prisma scoping review guidelines, it has a very specific guideline for that. So we encourage everyone to use that guideline. So it's not the main Prisma guideline, but it's a Prisma extension for scoping reviews. Yeah, great question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yassi. So we're going to take a few hands that are raised, but before then, Onesimus Kamakuke, sorry about that. His question is, what is your take in using AI to support systematic reviews?
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly don't have a clear-cut answer for that. So even in my systematic reviews, I have used certain AI-based analysis. It's not the large language model, the ones that are commonly used, like say, um, I would name them, but you all know the AI-based like large language models that we have. As so, I had this question from I asked this question from another journal editor, like, we are not sure, but it's changing. Initially, we would be very hesitant, but as time moves on, it might change. But in certain aspects of analysis, yes, we use AI. So we did a massive analysis about the COVID antigen-based tests, and we had to use AI for certain types of analysis, the meta regressions that we use, but not for article screening. However, now most of these uh, the software that we are using, they use AI for filtering, etc. So I think it's a very difficult question to answer, but they are changing, and as editors now, they are more and more accepting, as long as you specifically say, what did I use AI for? So if you just say, I use AI to summarize the results of the articles, I would not accept it, because it's very common knowledge that AI can hallucinate. It can read an article, it can give a wrong summary. Uh, but for certain types of article screening, certain types of statistical analysis, yes, we can use.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Yassi. So before we continue with the questions in the chat box, Ibrahim South, you can speak now. You've been unmuted.
Okay. Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Brian.
Okay. First of all, I'm very much thankful for a very insightful session. I have a very quick question regarding the data screening part. It is, as you
Yeah,
know, it is very difficult and tedious as well.
yeah,
So, what are your practices actually? Because currently I'm using Rayan, but they have some limited access and it requires subscription. COVID, as you see, very expensive
yes.
tool as well. So, given the limitation, what are your practices actually, which you do for
Yeah,
literature search and screening?
yeah, great question,
Could you
Ibrahim.
tell?
When I first started, I just did it manually. So you can use any what do you call this reference management database like EndNote or Zotero, and you can just go through that, and two people individually screen it. But if you use something like Covidence, that's extremely easy, because you can like click, 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 and even like what I do is, when I'm stuck in traffic, I can go through the Covidence screening tool. So it's entirely feasible to do it manually without having any resource. That's completely fine. It's a bit tedious, but if you have used EndNote or Zotero, you have the free versions of Zotero, and that can be used for manual. So I would import everything into one folder and say, this is for screening, and I'll duplicate it for the next, say, screen by title and abstract. I'll start deleting everything from that. That's the easiest way to handle that question, I guess. Have you tried those methods, Ibrahim? Reference management systems? Maybe Prime is muted. Sorry, you're muted.
Okay. I got your point, but I already went through this practice, but still,
It's
I just
yeah,
missed because the Prisma figures, I didn't remember which article was being excluded and what
yeah,
was the actual reason. So
yeah.
still, Covidence
That's
is very expensive too. Yeah.
Providence is expensive.
So I'm trying to
However,
explore, but yeah.
yeah, that's true. However, if you go to that website I mentioned, it has a app called R Shiny Base. is an app where you can include all these data and it'll develop your flowchart and everything. But again, free software, if you have this issue. Yeah, unfortunately. Or otherwise, collaborate with someone who has access to Covidence. So my university, Monash, provides access to Covidence. So anyone who is doing a systematic review with you, you can give access to Covidence. There are opportunities. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Yasif. I think can I make an addition to that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. So yeah, Ibrahim, I don't know if I don't know what country you're coming from, but Covidence grants like I think one free review for researchers coming from low and middle income countries. So maybe one or two, I can't really remember. But if you write to their support email, you can be granted a premium access to Covidence. I mean, if you indicate where you're coming from. It's really useful. I think I would say it's like the best software for screening systematic reviews. Okay, Dr. Yasif, we have a question here. I'm going to combine them. This question is from Himan and Kamal. So Iman says, I read somewhere that scoping review do not require risk of bias assessment. Is it right? And a similar question from Kamal. If I find many of my included studies having serious or high risk of bias, can that alter the quality of my systematic review findings?
Yeah, great questions again. So scoping review, you don't have to do the risk of bias assessment. That's why most of us like to do this scoping reviews. It's easy. You don't have to have that stringent criteria. Yeah, so it's not necessary. In terms of when you have a high risk of bias in your studies, again, that does not reduce the quality of your systematic review. It is just how we interpret the results of your systematic review. So even the latest Cochrane reviews that are published, the majority had high risk of bias. That's completely fine. What you can do is, after doing the meta-analysis, you can do another something called sensitivity analysis. So you can find the articles that have a high risk of bias and remove those articles and run the analysis again and see if there's a huge change in your result. That's called a sensitivity analysis. You can do meta regressions, whatever, and then you can report, okay, there's a huge difference. So maybe this is because it has high risk of bias. So as a reviewer or as an editor, I would never reject your paper if the articles that you have selected have high risk of bias. I would like to see this may be the potential reasons for high risk of bias. And this is my interpretation based on my sensitivity analysis. That would be fine.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Yasif. I think we have 3 more minutes for questions. So I'll take 1 or 2 more questions. This is coming from Pius Apia. He says, if a systematic review has been published and cross-checked, you got to know that it did not include some important papers. If you want to, conduct the same review with 3 years difference since the publication of that paper, how would you go about it?
It's a very common thing. We find that there are new papers coming up soon after publication, and you can always update your systematic review. So there are a couple of different types of systematic reviews. Some of them are regularly updated. Some of them are called living systematic review. That means you're continuously updating it. So after 3 years, you can say, okay, I searched more databases and we incorporated more terms that are appropriate. And this is our new data set. And then you do the meta-analysis, including your old data plus new data, and combine everything and publish an updated paper. Yeah, so at the moment also we are updating one of the COVID-related papers that we publish in Cochrane recently. So it's very common practice. It's completely fine to do that.
Dr. Yasif, I think there's a question from Dr. EMI. Ifeoma, sorry, is more or less like a follow-up to this question. She says, how will I reward the title of the updated systematic review when I'm done with the update?
Sorry, can you
How
ask the
will
question
you,
again?
yeah, how will you reward the title of the updated systematic review? How will the title look like to
Oh,
show that it's an
yeah.
updated review?
Yeah. Great question. So, in an updated systematic review, it is an entirely new paper. It's an entirely new paper. So, say someone else has done a systematic review and you want to update and you were not a co-author. It's like writing a new paper. So, it's completely fine to have a new title. But what we say is in our introduction, we'll say this is an update of this previous paper, which had a different title. That's completely fine. Or you can continue to have the same title. So the common practice in Cochrane is they would continue to have the same title, and it'll say this is an updated version of the previous one. So you have that term updated in the title. But you can have new authors. So the Cochrane recommendation is if you're an author of the previous one, you will automatically be eligible to be an author in the next paper. And if you contribute to the subsequent papers, you'll be co-authors. You can have a new title and you just have to link it to the previous one. Yeah.
Hey, Dr. Yasi, do you have some final wordings for us?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I didn't have a lot of time to answer your questions. I saw really nice questions. You are very welcome to contact me on LinkedIn or email and just ask for questions, ask for help. I'm very happy to mentor you in your research. Uh,
So,
um,
Dr. Yasi, could you please just
yeah,
share your email address?
yes, I will type it again. Yeah, this is here. And one final word is when I started writing systematic reviews, I was so overwhelmed by all these statistical methods. What are these things and how can I learn everything? Just write one or two systematic reviews and you will automatically become an expert. It's pretty easy. And once you have written one or two, then you can write to anyone who is a Cochrane author, who is leading Cochrane systematic review and say, I have some experience, can I contribute to you? And that's how I got to know most, like that's how I learned how to write systematic reviews properly by working with uh, prominent authors from other countries like Birmingham, Harvard. Uh, you're more than welcome to write to them and say, can I contribute? And they'll help you progress in your career. So don't be afraid. Start writing a systematic review and try to collaborate. So if you see them in your conferences, just go talk to them. Talk to these very senior people. They are very nice and say, I want to write a systematic review. This is my background and I've started working on it. Would you like to have a look at it? And getting that works most of the time. Yeah. And wish you all the best.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Yasi. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. So, some final thank you. Some final information from us is that first, yes, we're happy to share the slides and recordings,
Yeah.
and we hope that that will be shared as soon as possible, maybe within the next 3 days. We'll also be sharing a link to a post workshop survey. We would like you to fill a link, and we'll be sharing a link to our future events because we have upcoming webinars and upcoming practical workshops and upcoming mentorship programs as well. We organize mentorship programs where we assist researchers to conduct systematic reviews. We connect them to experienced mentors in their field of interest. And if you've applied for our current mentorship program, you will be hearing from us soon. A link to our platforms have been shared. We have a WhatsApp community platform, and you could really take advantage of that because we share lots of opportunities there. Beyond our upcoming events, we share lots of opportunities that are really useful to researchers in low and middle income countries. So I think God Save has just shared it. You can also follow us on our social media platforms. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have lots and lots of very quality videos on YouTube. And I believe that many of them will be very helpful if maybe this is your first time or you're a beginner in the systematic review joining. So we've also shared links to AuthorHate social media platforms. Like I mentioned earlier, AuthorHate is a big, large global community that supports researchers in every stage in their career and in any angle. And AuthorHate has a very strong mentorship program and mentorship system where you can connect with researchers from anywhere in the world and in any field at all. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you once again, Dr. Yassif. And this webinar series will continue next week, Friday, from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. West African time. So we'll share further details with you if you're registered. We'll share further details with you via email. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. All right, but can we, if it's possible, Dr. Yassif, can we do like a group photo? So if
sure, that'd be
it's
fantastic.
possible, you could just please put on your camera. Dr. Yassif, can you please unpin your screen? I don't know, it seems your screen is
Okay.
pinned, yeah.
How do I do that?